ShotokuTech, Saturday Story Time. These are the stories that you might have missed while you were caught up in other stories. You're watching ShotokuTech, Saturday Story Time, 20 June 2020 edition. And yes, it used to be called ShotokuTech News of the Week. If you're a fan of ShotokuTech News of the Week, and it's now ShotokuTech Saturday Story Time, you know I'm all excited about dark matter and the Bose-Einstein Condensate. Well, I've actually just created this fifth state of matter on board the International Space Station. I know Astro Christina's already returned, but here she is installing the Cold Atom Laboratory on the International Space Station. I think this took place in 2018. So this is a suitcase-sized device, and it can chill atoms of rubidium and potassium in a vacuum chamber, and then they use a laser light to slow the movement, and then magnetic fields contain the resulting cloud of atoms, and it is cooled to nearly absolute zero at minus 273 degrees centigrade, and this creates the Bose-Einstein Condensate. So this was originally theorized by Albert Einstein and Satyendra Nath Bose in the early 20s as the fifth state of matter. The other four states are solids, liquids, gases, and plasma. This supercooled gas no longer behaves as individual atoms and particles, but rather as an entity in a single quantum state. Wow, mind blown, and we're just getting started. Now, I've recently done a story about large masses underneath the mantle of the Earth responsible for the shifting of the tectonic plates, and this is another interesting story here. Giant previously unknown structure discovered deep inside the Earth. Researchers have detected a large, previously unknown structure consisting of unusually dense hot rock deep inside the Earth below the Pacific Ocean. This structure is known as an ultra-low velocity zone, ULVZ. It's located on the boundary between the Earth's superheated molten core and the solid mantle, lying directly underneath the volcanic Marquesas Islands in French Polynesia in the South Pacific. Evidence suggests that a previously unidentified ULVZ beneath the Hawaiian Islands at the core mantle boundary is much larger than previously thought. ULVZs lie at the bottom of plumes within the Earth, geological features where hot rocky material is thought to rise up from the core mantle boundary to the planet's outer crust, leading to the creation of volcanic islands, such as Hawaii and the Marquesas. The ULVZ located beneath Hawaii is the largest example known to science. And that's very interesting stuff. Hot, dense structures very deep in the core of the Earth, rising all the way to the surface. So now, you can't just turn on some loud music to prevent people from spying on your conversation. You actually have to turn out the lights. It's called lamp phone. Anyone with a laptop and less than $1,000 worth of equipment, like a telescope, a $400 electro-optical sensor, can listen in on sounds that are taking place in a room that's hundreds of feet away in real time by simply observing minuscule vibrations those sounds create on the glass surface of a light bulb inside the room. NASA has selected Astrobotic to fly water hunting rover to the moon. So when you consider that we're going to be spending time on the moon over an extended period, obviously we need water. Another cool thing about water is you can break it down into hydrogen and oxygen and develop a variety of products, including rocket fuel. So this Viper rover from Astrobotic is going to be exploring the lunar surface at the poles looking for water. This is all part of NASA's plan to work with commercial partners in developing space exploration. Industrial partners can quickly deliver scientific instruments and technology demonstrations to the moon. Astrobotic is responsible for end-to-end services for delivery of Viper, including the integration within its Griffin lander, a launch from Earth, and landing on the moon. And it's going to wind up on the moon's south pole. It's going to roam over several miles and use 4 different science instruments to sample various soil environments in search of water ice. It's a 100 Earth Day mission. So here, scientists are developing a switch in the mouse's brain that induces a deep slumber similar to hibernation. In fact, this state actually reduces the body temperatures in this deep sleep. Takeshi Sakurai at the University of Tsukuba in Japan were developing this finding about this peptide called QRFP. Injecting into animals actually increased their activity. But when the researchers switched on the neurons that were making the peptide in mice, the mice stayed still and got very cold, opposite of what they expected. This could have medical implications in humans if they can reproduce this. During this period, the mice's metabolism remained properly regulated. Afterwards, the rodents revived spontaneously and unharmed, just as with hibernation. They performed the same experiment on rats, and rats don't enter into this state normally, but they got the same effect. That's very promising. No, your friends weren't ignoring your calls and texts. They just had T-Mobile, and T-Mobile suffered an outage on Tuesday the 16th of over 12 hours. There was some routing issue on their core network. It's being investigated by the FCC. We're demanding answers, and so are the consumers. Okay, so the first of 2 solar eclipses this year will occur on Sunday, June 21st. So if you're catching ShotokuTech Saturday Storytime, you're not too late. Make sure to read this article. There's links to tell you how to best observe this in your location, but primarily the total solar eclipse will be visible in parts of Africa and Asia. The Virtual Telescope product does live streams of notable celestial events, and they will be kicking off coverage of this at 10:30 p.m. Pacific time on Saturday night. So you might be able to glimpse it over the internet if you can't see it from where you're at. A team led by Scripps Research has discovered antibodies in the blood of recovered COVID-19 patients that provide powerful protection against SARS-CoV-2, the coronavirus that causes the disease. The discovery of these very potent antibodies represents an extremely rapid response to a totally new pathogen. In principle, injections of such antibodies could be given to patients in the early stage of COVID-19 to reduce the level of virus and protect against severe disease. They might be able to use it to protect healthcare workers, elderly people, and people who respond poorly to traditional vaccines. So, I reported earlier in the year about this large Saharan dust cloud that's heading across the Atlantic Ocean, and it's on its way to the United States. It's a fairly common occurrence. It happens a few times a year. More recent satellites allow us to see these large clouds of dust form and blow over the Atlantic Ocean. The image here is from June 15th, 2020. This is a very dry layer in the atmosphere. Tropical weather systems, including hurricanes, have a tough time forming in the dry atmosphere. So it's very early in the hurricane season. We've already had 3 named storms, but with the dust in the air, the tropics are going to quiet down. Here's an interesting story. Scientists are developing a way to pollinate plants with soap bubbles instead of relying on bees. So researchers have been investigating various methods to handle the work of pollination more efficiently than doing it by hand. They worked out that the soap bubbles could indeed carry the pollen. Then they tested out different bubble formulations and settled on a certain compound. The researchers used a bubble gun on a pear orchard, producing fruit that demonstrated the pollination's success. Nearly a decade ago, Chilean scientists discovered what looked to be a deflated football among ancient marine deposits on the Antarctic coast. This fossilized orb, named The Thing, sat unnamed in collections at Chile's National Museum of Natural History. The Thing may actually be a 66-million-year-old egg. Measuring 11 inches in length and 7 inches wide, it is the largest soft-shell egg ever found and the second largest egg in history. The biggest egg ever discovered was laid by an elephant bird, a kiwi relative, that went relatively extinct a few thousand years ago. Scientists hypothesize that this egg could be laid by a giant marine reptile like a mosasaur. That's a mosasaur there. So, marine deposits of the egg's origin have previously yielded the remains of mosasaurs and plesiosaurs. And this is a picture of a plesiosaur here. So, authors have hypothesized that this is sort of a nursery site, shallow protected water, a cove environment where offspring could have a quiet time growing up after hatching. It's possible the ancient marine lizard laid eggs in the open sea, and they could have also buried these eggs on the beach just beyond the breakers. I don't quite know what to make of this, but a genetically engineered mosquitoes are going to be released in Florida after the EPA approval, despite objections. So it's a genetically modified male mosquito named OX5034. It's received state approval, federal approval. It's going to be released in the Florida Keys now through 2022. Many of the local residents object to this, and a coalition of environmental advocacy groups are also concerned. And quoting here, this is a Jurassic Park experiment, except without the island. What could possibly go wrong? We don't know, because they unlawfully refuse to seriously analyze the environmental risks. They want to see if this genetically modified mosquito is an alternative to spraying insecticides to control Aedes aegypti. It's a species of mosquito that carries several deadly diseases such as Zika, dengue, chikungunya, and yellow fever. This mosquito OX5034 has been altered to produce female offspring that die at the larval stage, well before hatching and growing large enough to bite and spread disease. Only the female bites for blood, which she needs to mature her eggs. Males feed only on nectar and thus are not carrier for disease. This is interesting. So they've been studying human brain tissue and they find that there's traces of Neanderthal DNA. We humans like to think we're the cream of the crop, but the truth is we're all a bunch of mutts. Many of our ancient ancestors mingled with the Neanderthals, and now some of that mingling is still present in our DNA today. So this study was led by J. Gray Camp at Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology and the University of Basel. They used stem cells from a biobank called Human-Induced Pluripotent Stem Cells Initiative, or HIPSI for short. The individuals that have submitted their genetic material to the program are largely based in the UK and Northern Europe. Scientists already knew there's a high density of humans that retain traces of their Neanderthal past. Using this stem cell material, researchers built tiny chunks of brain tissue called organoids. The tissue is human in origin, but still contains up to 4% Neanderthal DNA. That might not seem like a lot, but when you combine that small percentage from each individual, you eventually reach a point where you have a much larger percentage of Neanderthal genes to work with. Make sure to look for the links down below to Blogger and find the links to these stories there. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching ShotokuTech, Saturday Story Time. And yes, it used to be called ShotokuTech News of the Week. Thank you for watching ShotokuTech. Please subscribe, comment, like, and share.